He never loved me. I can tell you that right now, the way one loves. He loved in his own way, which is not too good. And so he had no respect for me. We got very close to getting married in 1964. He said, "You know, I'm not going to marry an actress." And I said, "Well, I don't blame you. I wouldn't wish that on anybody." And I actually didn't want to marry him.
She once admitted, sometimes the most dangerous men don't raise their voice. They raise their phone. That chilling line wasn't movie dialogue. It was her real life. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 6 men who turned adoration into surveillance and devotion into destruction. These weren't villains out of a script. They were household names, admired by millions, while privately crushing the woman beside them. And if you think you've already guessed who's coming first on this list, you may be wrong, because the most shocking story is yet to come. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Number 1, Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a star, he was the most sought-after crooner in America, a man who could walk into any room and silence it. To Angie Dickinson, that kind of attention felt intoxicating at first. He courted her with expensive dinners, gifts, and a promise of security that seemed untouchable in Hollywood. For a young actress trying to find her footing, Sinatra's world was the kind of safety net most people only dreamed about. But what began as warmth soon revealed edges sharper than she expected. Those famous words, "You are mine," shifted from playful passion to strict rules. It wasn't romance anymore, it was monitoring. She recalled being followed to movie sets, the quiet presence of a hired shadow, making sure she behaved as he expected. Directors who dared cast her against his wishes soon faced anger that wasn't shouted, but delivered with a phone call that ended opportunities in an instant. Even inside her own home, she felt cornered. Resistance brought destruction, items smashed, reminders left behind to prove he still held the power. What made it worse was that Sinatra didn't need to yell. His influence worked in silence, reaching far beyond words. He could punish with ease, not through hands, but through connections, shutting doors without saying a thing. At first, Dickinson thought that protection meant love, but over time she realized it was simply restriction, disguised as devotion. His world may have looked golden from the outside, but for her, it became a cage. But Sinatra wasn't the only man who wielded silence and influence like a weapon. Number 2, Jack Webb. Jack Webb's authority wasn't in his public persona. It was in the control he held off camera. As a producer and creator, his name carried weight in casting rooms. To Angie Dickinson, though, that power revealed itself after she refused him. He wasn't the type to shower her with extravagance or linger in the spotlight the way others did. His reach was silent, bureaucratic, and easy to overlook until it touched her life directly. She remembered the shift as immediate. Meetings ended before they began. Agents who once called often now had nothing to say. Within weeks, she counted 3 roles gone without explanation. One cancellation could be bad luck, but 3 in a row? It left little room for doubt. This wasn't an argument. He never raised his voice or confronted her. It was absence, a kind of professional vanishing act that trailed her after the rejection. That absence became its own punishment. Unlike men who demanded attention through jealousy or dramatic gestures, Webb's retaliation was invisible. And that invisibility made it even harder to expose, because how do you prove an opportunity that never happened? For Dickinson, the lesson was bitter. His silence carried as much force as shouting ever could. Years later, she would try to untangle her feelings about those lost chances. "I've forgiven myself, but not him," she admitted, speaking quietly. The harm had already been done. And if Webb could erase her work from the screen, another man would go further, this time dismantling her family. Number 3. Burt Bacharach. At first glance, Burt Bacharach and Angie Dickinson looked like one of Hollywood's most enviable couples. He was a celebrated songwriter at the peak of his creativity. She was a rising film star embraced by the industry. Together they appeared glamorous, often photographed smiling at premieres and charity events. Not long into their marriage, they welcomed a daughter, Nikki. To the outside world, it seemed like a perfect family beginning. But once the cameras faded, the cracks inside the marriage began to show. The deepest shock came when Nikki was diagnosed with autism, a moment that might have united many parents. Instead, Bacharach's first concern wasn't his child's health, but his own schedule. He bluntly asked, "Will she affect my schedule?" It was a question that cut straight through Dickinson, signaling a kind of detachment she hadn't expected. That coldness only grew worse. She later spoke of the times when he didn't hide his infidelities. He even brought a mistress into their home, upstairs from where their infant daughter slept. What he called freedom looked more like cruelty to the woman left holding the pieces. Number 4. Larry King. Larry King built his reputation as the sharp interviewer who could disarm presidents and celebrities with ease. On screen, he appeared composed, curious, and endlessly professional. At home with Angie Dickinson, however, that same intensity quickly shifted into something else. What looked like admiration turned into watchfulness, and the way he studied her began to feel less like affection and more like surveillance. She noticed how his eyes followed her at social gatherings, especially when she laughed or shared a smile with other men. What started as glances became long silences, moments heavy enough that she knew a confrontation would follow later. That suspicion escalated. She described finding hidden microphones placed in her own car, a discovery that shocked her, but also made sense of the constant questioning about where she went, who she talked to, even how long she took to return home. And then there were the outbursts. Dickinson remembered one night in particular when King, drunk and overcome, slammed his head into a mirror until glass shattered around him. He collapsed, whispering, "I love you so much. It's driving me crazy." What should have been an expression of passion instead revealed the depth of his obsession. Number 5. Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson ruled late night in a way few ever have. For millions of viewers, his stage felt like the safest place in television. And for Angie Dickinson, he seemed like a trusted ally. He invited her onto The Tonight Show often, chatted with her as though she mattered, and gave the impression that her voice carried weight. She believed their friendship was genuine, built not just on celebrity, but on a kind of mutual respect few women in Hollywood could count on. That belief was tested one night, just minutes before she was about to have one of her bigger moments on the show. Carson decided to roll an unaired clip without warning her first. The footage shifted the mood entirely, and instead of setting her up to shine, it left her sitting there with nothing else to add. He controlled the conversation, not by arguing, but by leaving her silent in front of the cameras. For the audience, it looked harmless. But for Dickinson, the message landed clearly. This space wasn't hers to occupy. On air, Carson still praised her, calling her a timeless icon, while slyly suggesting she knew when to stay quiet. That backhanded framing stung because it wasn't a private slight. It was broadcast for millions to remember. Number 6. John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy's image has always carried a sense of myth. The charm, the power, the air of mystery around his personal life made him a natural subject for endless speculation. Angie Dickinson's name was added to that story early on, and once it appeared, it never seemed to leave the whispers that followed her career. For decades, people linked the two together, spinning tales of a long affair she never claimed. Biographers repeatedly framed it as her longest-running affair, suggesting a private connection hidden behind the public spotlight. But Angie pushed back loudly against that idea. She denied it outright, telling those who asked that it had never happened. She even remarked, "If he had, I'd have told my confessor." A blunt way of saying there was no secret to hide. In her view, Kennedy wasn't even her type, and the suggestion spoke more to rumors than to reality. The challenge for Dickinson wasn't the man himself, but the cage rumors built around her. Once they stuck, they distorted her truth and repeatedly called her integrity into question. Friends insisted they had seen her and Kennedy together socially, which only fueled the speculation further. She never denied being present at events with him, but she resisted the leap from acquaintance to inside scandal. From the outside, Angie Dickinson's life seemed wrapped in glamour. Hollywood sets, red carpets, and powerful men who surrounded her. But off-screen, those same men blurred the lines between love and control, leaving marks that lasted longer than any movie role. Again and again, admiration turned into surveillance, trust into betrayal, and devotion into cruelty acted as care. Through every relationship, she learned a painful but steady truth. Real love doesn't demand silence. It doesn't command fear or ownership. It creates space instead of cages. That lesson stayed with her, and it's one worth remembering even now.